First of all, let me give you a distance greeting to bring the voice of the animal kingdom into this gathering, which is that's the hello, I'm Jane in chimpanzee language. And it's because of the chimpanzees, really, where it all started, that we have this gathering today. So I want to thank everybody who's made this possible. They've all been thanked, and I won't go through all the names again because we don't have that much time left. But I will also introduce Mr. H. Some of you know Mr. H. When I was traveling around the world, he always came with me, and he still manages to meet people, but it's virtually. And the two people who have not been thanked, who've done so much hard work to make this happen, are Tara herself and Jasmina. And so it's this team of people who've all been thanked, our sponsors, our partners, and all of you who've taken part in it, and the teachers and your parents. It's working together like this that we really can make a difference. And I think your projects were fabulous. And for some students, I know working through the pandemic was really hard. A lot of you were unable to be with your friends to do things together. And it's always harder when you're in isolation to get really, inspired and enthusiastic. And when I was grounded, as I call it, by the pandemic, I was actually on my way to Brussels to give a talk in the United Nations building. And I was in the car and somebody ran out of the house and said, Jane, come back. They've closed the United Nations building. The pandemic is going to close everything down. So I was grounded right here where I am now. And I'm in the house I grew up in Bournemouth on the south coast of England. And I can look out of the window and see the tree up which I spent so long as a child. I was born loving animals. I had a wonderful mother who's somewhere, where is she? Yes, she's up there behind me. And she supported my love of animals. And when I was growing up, which will really amaze some of you, I mean, here we are with this incredible technology, talking to each other. We can be from around the world. And when I was growing up, there wasn't even television. We had the radio, we called it the wireless. And I think when I was growing up, there was just one program on it in the UK. And so for me, it was books. That's why I love it that the Literary Foundation is sponsoring this, because books for me were so important. And yes, up here behind me, the Tarzan books and Dr. Dolittle. And then I had this amazing mother and my very great teacher, and that was my dog, Rusty, who taught me that animals have personalities, minds, and feelings. And then, as you all know, I decided I wanted to go to Africa and live with wild animals and write books about them. Everybody laughed at me. How will you do that without money? And without, Africa's far away, and you're just a girl. Girls didn't do that sort of thing back then. But my mother said, if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work awfully hard and take advantage of every opportunity. And then if you don't give up, maybe you find a way. That's the message I've taken to young people all around the world, especially in disadvantaged communities. And I wish Mum was alive to know how many have come up to me and said, or written to me and said, Jane, thank you, because you taught me that because you did it, I can do it too. So yes, I got to Africa and I was amazingly offered the opportunity of living with not just any animal, but the one most like us. And because the chimps are so like us biologically and behaviorally, it gradually, I was able to change the way scientists were thinking back then, because I was told I couldn't talk about chimpanzees having personalities or minds or emotions because those were unique to us. And I shouldn't have empathy with them, because if you're a scientist, you have to be objective and you can't have empathy with your subject, which is absolute rubbish. And it's the reason why so much cruelty has evolved towards animals, because people were thinking they didn't have personalities, minds, or emotions. And any of you who have an animal, and I love it, Tara, that your dear little cat's been curled up there all the time, part of this gathering. And you all know that, of course, animals have personalities. Of course, they have minds. Of course, they have emotions. So I grew up loving them, finally got to Africa, had the chance to be with these beings who are so like us. We share 98.6% of our DNA with them. And as I say, science has gradually come to admit that animals have personalities, minds, and emotions. Well, when this pandemic grounded me here, I was at first frustrated and angry. And then I thought, well, that's not much use. So with a little team from the Jane Goodall Institute, we created this virtual Jane. And from where I'm sitting now, which is actually up in the attic, where it's also my bedroom, it's a very tiny little room, and I can hardly get into bed sometimes because of the wires and lights and microphones, and we've made it into a studio. And the advantage is that I've been able to reach literally millions more people in many more countries than if I'd been traveling. It's not the same as meeting in person, but it's an awful lot better than sulking around because you can't meet people in person. And just during the pandemic, we've started institutes and roots and shoots in India. Of course, now India is having a terrible time. And any of you who like to help, Tara's been working on providing help for some of these students. Many have lost their mothers, and Nepal is the same. And Brazil has had a dreadful time. And America has lost thousands and thousands of people, and the UK as well. But the one thing about this pandemic, which we all need to realize, it isn't something that just happened. It happened because of us. It happened because of our absolute disrespect of the environment and of animals. So what about that? Well, we invade the animals' homes, we cut down the trees or wherever they happen to live. Animals are forced into closer contact with us. Makes it easier for a bacteria or a virus, and this is a virus, to jump from an animal to a person. We catch them, traffic them live around the world, sell them in wildlife markets in Asia, bushmeat markets in Africa, and various markets around the world. We sell them for food, for clothing, for medicine, and for exotic pets. And as these animals are traveling around the world, they're taking their viruses with them, which don't hurt them. But if they have the opportunity to jump from an animal to a person, it may bond with a cell in our body and start a new disease like COVID-19. And it's not just wildlife. Think of our factory farms, animals crowded in terrible, unhygienic, horribly cruel condition. Another opportunity for a new disease to start. Many have. And just remember that every one of these animals, whether wild or domestic, they all have individual lives. They all have personalities. They can all feel pain and fear. And that makes it very different when you think how we treat animals. So somebody earlier on talked about the amazing brain that we've been gifted with. We have an extraordinary intellect. And it did show we got together around the world and created vaccines, which one day hopefully will make life more normal. It has in some countries. But think of the thousands of animals that were used to create these vaccines, to test these vaccines, and many other ways that they're used in laboratories. And they're not treated well, usually. So we've got a long way to go. And this is why I'm so excited with Roots and Shoots. If we see the problems in the world, the climate change and the loss of animal species, we're supposedly in the midst of the sixth great extinction. I've seen animals vanish from around where I was growing up here as a child. I know about the devastation of the forests in Africa. I know about the awful pollution and overfishing in the ocean. And we depend on forests and oceans for our air and to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So as we look around at the harm that we've done, people say to me, but Jane, you can't really have hope. You've seen so much devastation and suffering. And I have. I've been to countries and seen the result of the hurricanes and the flooding and the droughts and the fires caused by climate change. I've seen people dispersed from their houses by climate change, people living in low-lying areas because of sea level rise, they've lost their homes. Bangladesh is a terrifying example of that. But at the same time, I do have hope. And people say, how do you have hope? Well, what we've seen this morning is my main reason for hope. Look at all that you've done. And remember, you're here at this award ceremony and you got prizes, but it's happening in 67 countries around the world. Just think of it. Just imagine all the thousands and thousands of schools who've been doing projects just like you. Just think of all the people who've grown up through Roots and Shoots and they're out and they're in government, they're in law, they're in all kinds of aspects of life, and their parents and their teachers. And they keep the values of Roots and Shoots. So what are the values of Roots and Shoots? Yes, living in harmony with nature, living in harmony with each other, understanding that much more important than the color of the skin or the culture or the language or the religion is the fact that we're all human beings. You've seen that today. People of different cultures, young people of different cultures working together to make this world a better place. And that's why I hope this pandemic is really a wake-up call, helping us to understand we've got to stop this destruction of the natural world. And you young people, don't let anybody tell you it's your responsibility. It's not your responsibility, it's our responsibility. And our responsibility is to work with you, to help you to make this a better world for people, for animals, and for the environment, because we're all interconnected. So, you know, as I say, my greatest reason for hope is all of you young people, what you're doing, what you're planning to do, what you've done. It's not that you can change the world, you are changing the world every single day. Think about it. And of course, another reason for hope, we're finally beginning to use our astounding intellect to do things better, to create more solar and wind power, to get off the use of fossil fuels and so much more. And then the resilience of nature. I mean, places we've absolutely destroyed can be given another chance. Nature needs a bit of time and sometimes help. Planting trees can keep the spread of the desert back. And the number of animal species that have been saved from total extinction and the rewilding that's happening, breeding animals in captivity with a goal of putting them back in the wild once we've saved the environment. They can't go back in the wild until they've got an environment to go to. And a terrific example is this beautiful scimitar-horned oryx, which was rescued in Abu Dhabi and I think some other UAE countries, bred in some European and American zoos. Herds were put together very carefully, and they've been taken back to Chad, a dry place in Africa. And not only are they living there, but they've had babies. And it's just so beautiful. In the UK, we're rewilding. People are letting the vergers along the roads have wildflowers for butterflies and birds to have highways to move, to have this connection that they need with each other. We're bringing beavers back to regulate the landscape so that there'll be less flooding in some areas. So this is all the hope that I have. But once again, finally, the most hope is all of you, because you are changing the world. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for the hard work that's led to this day. And thank you for the hard work that's going to go on into the future so that we can save this beautiful planet before it's too late. Thank you.